I address a cordial greeting to all of you who joined this conference. Welcome to this self-knowledge course. Today we will talk about return and recurrence. This is a particularly interesting conference because it will allow us to answer some questions that perhaps we have asked ourselves at some point. For example, with this topic that we are going to see today, we will understand what the causes are for the déjà vu, which is a sense of having already experienced or seen something you're currently seeing or experiencing, but knowing you haven't actually experienced it. Like visiting a place for the first time and having a strong impression of having been there before, or meeting someone for the first time and feeling an immediate affinity and sense of having met that person before, or on the contrary, feeling an immediate aversion, a dislike for someone without even knowing him well. Today we are going to see, studying these two laws, what is the true cause of this. We are also going to talk about successive lives or past lives, to see if it is true that there are successive lives or not. We are also going to study how we can modify our destiny. As you see, this topic will be very interesting. And to begin to understand all this, we are going to see how the laws of return and recurrence work, which are two of the 48 laws that govern this physical world, and we are going to learn how to transcend them. But let's begin by reflecting on this. A man is what his life is. If a man does not modify anything within himself, if he does not radically transform his life, if he does not work on himself, he is wasting his time miserably. If we are here at this moment, listening to this conference, following this course, or looking for consciousness awakening topics, it is because we have reached a point in our life where something internally demands that we make an interior change. We have reached that mathematical point in our lives where we start to question our existence, and where we start to realize that the way we've been leading our lives, we won't even be able to figure out and to achieve the transcendental purpose of our existence. Therefore, to start moving forward, to start waking up, we must generate an internal revolution that leads us to make radical changes in our lives. Otherwise, we will only be miserably wasting our time, as we have been doing existence after existence. Once we understand the need to start making a radical change within ourselves, it is necessary to begin to know what are the things that keep us tied to always acting in the same way, and repeating the same life lessons, over and over again, without transcending them. Let's start then by studying what the law of return is. The word return comes from turning again. So, what this law teaches us is that everything rotates repeatedly. This is the law that makes all cycles. We see the planet turning around itself, making a day and a night, and after that turn starting over again. And we see it turning around the sun, making 4 seasons, and at the end of that turn, starting over again. But we need to know that this law also governs us, as this is the law that mechanically keeps us dying and being reborn life after life. We can see that life, with all its times, is a wheel. We are born, we grow up, maybe we reproduce, we grow old, and we die. And we believe that when we die everything ends, but it turns out that it doesn't. It turns out that death is only the return to the starting point of life itself, with the possibility of repeating it again. As we explained in Conference 8, where we talked about the evolution and involution in the wheel of samsara, we said that we have 3,000 cycles to achieve self-realization, or 3,000 turns on that wheel, passing through the different kingdoms of nature. And upon reaching the human kingdom in each cycle, we are entitled to 108 lives as humans. And between one life and another, there is always a return process. And what is that process? Well, once our physical body dies, we go through a trial process, where the actions carried out in the previous life will be weighed, and with this, the consequences that will be generated for the next life will be determined. And after that, we are going to wait in limbo, for the necessary conditions are met, so we can be born again. So that those who will be our parents meet, fall in love, get married, or whatever the process that leads them to have a sexual intercourse, in which they will gestate the physical body to which our spark will be connected to return to a new physical existence. Our psychological defects also return from one life to the other. But it is interesting to know that we usually continue in the seed of our descendants. We usually come back in the same family tree. For example, the grandmother who died a few years ago can be the little niece who was born recently. If the person has not yet exhausted their 108 lives as a human in that cycle, their spark continues to be reborn into their family's offspring. And even after having exhausted his 108 existences as a human, without having done the necessary work to awaken his consciousness, he will continue to return in the different kingdoms of nature. So, if that grandmother who died a few years ago did not have the right to more lives as a human in that cycle, is going to return, but now in the animal kingdom. And could even arrive home as a pet, a puppy, or a kitten, who usually have very human attitudes. If we do a conscious astral projection and investigate who that pet was when it was human, we will discover with surprise the veracity of what we are affirming here. With the technique of astral projection, which we teach in Conference 3, we can also check if there really are successive lives. We can also ask our inner being to show us which of the 108 existences of the present cycle we are currently living. Or we can ask him to show us one of our past lives, or to show us the trial process that occurs between one life and another, and if we have the merits, we will come to see this and verify that the law of return is a reality. But it is important to know that return is not the same as reincarnation. These concepts are often confused with each other. Returning is what we do. We die and are born again, driven by a mechanical law, because our consciousness is asleep. Therefore, we do not have the ability to decide how, where, or under what conditions to be born. Reincarnating, on the contrary, is a voluntary process experienced by beings who have already awakened consciousness, who have worked on themselves, achieving a great internal advance, so that at the moment of death they are aware of the process. They are aware of having left the physical body, and can decide in which family, when, and in what conditions to be born, in order to continue their process of spiritual development. Now let's look at the law of recurrence. The word recurrence means to occur again. And just as by the law of return, we return to this world over and over again until we do an inner work to transcend that law. By the law of recurrence, we live repeating the same life lessons over and over again, until we learn to draw the wisdom that is contained in each situation that we have to live. So, this is the law by which everything is mechanically repeated over and over again. In this physical manifestation, things happen and cyclically happen again. Thus, as we are subjected by this law, the life of each one of us, with all its times, is always the same, repeating itself from existence to existence, through the innumerable centuries. The life of each one of us, in particular, is a living film that, when we die, we take with us to eternity. Each one takes his film and brings it back, to project it again on the screen of a new existence. Each of the situations that arise in our life, throughout it, are the different scenes of our film. We believe that we drive our life, that we make decisions, and we don't realize how we simply repeat the same actions, the same mistakes, the same circumstances, life after life. We have been visiting the same places, meeting the same souls, going through the same situations, only aggravated by the consequences of these. That's why we experience things that we are sure we've experienced before, and meeting people, and already having an impression of those people, without having treated them enough. And that is the reason for what the déjà vu, or even for what we call premonition. We have the feeling that we have experienced this before, or that we know what is going to happen, and it is only because we have been experiencing that same situation so many times, that we have it engraved in the memory of our waters, although we do not remember it with our mind. When we come to understand and verify this, we realize that our destiny is already written, that nothing that happens to us happens by mere chance. And it is that the repetition of dramas, comedies, and tragedies is a fundamental axiom of the law of recurrence. In each new existence, the same circumstances are always repeated. And the actors of such scenes, always repeated, are those people who live within us, the eyes. If we disintegrate those actors, those eyes that originate the always repeated scenes of our life, then the repetition of such circumstances would become more than impossible. Obviously, without actors, there can be no scenes. And it's very important that we reflect on this. Since understanding this will shed light on how we can begin to modify our lives. Many people live inside of us. We have the illusion of being one, but it's only to begin to observe ourselves, to realize that psychologically, we are many different people. And each one has their own way of thinking, feeling, and acting. We see that at one point we are happy, optimistic, courageous, and we think that everything will be fine. And at another time, we see ourselves sad, depressed, discouraged, and thinking that everything will go wrong, and that nothing is worth it. At another time, we are an angry person, who can only think of attacking or taking revenge. And at another time, and depending on the circumstance, a lustful self will manifest through us that will only seek sexual satisfaction. We are not a conscious individual, we are a bunch of psychological defects, a bunch of different ways of being, that arise in us, depending on the circumstances that are presented to us, leading us to repeat the same dramas, the same tragedies, the same comedies, etc., life after life. And it is important to begin to observe and understand this, because only by disintegrating each of our ways of being, will we free ourselves from all our recurrences, and from each of the commitments that these eyes have acquired with other people throughout our different existences. Reflecting seriously on the law of recurrence or repetition of scenes in each return, we discover through intimate self-observation the secret springs of this issue. If in the past existence at the age of 25 we had a love affair, it is indubitable that the I of such a commitment will look for the guy or the lady of his dreams at the age of 25 years old, in the new existence. If the lady in question was only 15 years old, then the I of such an adventure will search for her beloved in the new existence, at the same exact age. It is clear to understand that the two I's, both his and hers, seek each other telepathically, and meet again to repeat the same love affair of the past existence. Two enemies who fought to the death in the past existence will look for each other again in the new existence to repeat their tragedy at the corresponding age. If two people had a lawsuit over real estate at the age of 40 in the past existence, at the same age they will seek each other telepathically in the new existence to repeat the same thing. So, as we can see, people's psychological defects are telepathically dated to repeat the same recurrence. Suddenly we have a desire to change the route, or visit such a place, or talk to such a person, and similar things move in the other person. And we do not realize how these are the same psychological defects that led us in another life to live that same circumstance. Each of our psychological defects has many commitments, and none of them will lead us to awaken consciousness, and to get out of this wheel. On the contrary, they will seek to manage us through desire and through our mind, so that we fall in the same situations in which they will manifest themselves in us, to feed on our energy. Life after life we become simple puppets of our defects. We go through life dragged by circumstances, never denying ourselves these desires, fatally fulfilling each of these commitments, and living in the illusion that we are the ones who run our lives. Within each one of us live many people full of commitments, who come to fulfill them. Our lustful eyes, created many lives ago, bring their sexual commitments to fulfill. Our treacherous eyes bring their own commitments. Our violent, tyrannical, and submissive selves brings theirs. And each of our vices have marked in this existence the age at which they will begin to manifest, how many times they will, etc. The serious thing about all this is that the intellect ignores the existence of such people, or I's, within us, and of such commitments that are fatally fulfilled. Our personality is only the instrument of different I's. Through our personality, each one of those I's fulfills its commitments. We are miserable logs dragged by the raging waves of the sea of existence. If life brings us sad situations, we cry. If it brings us happy situations, we laugh. If it brings us violent situations, we get angry. And if it brings us lustful situations, we become sexually aroused. But we never reflect, we never take control of our emotions, desires, thoughts, and actions. Getting out of this misfortune, this unconsciousness, the lamentable state in which we find ourselves, is only possible by dying in oneself. If we really want to change our destiny, if we want our consciousness to direct every act of our existence, we have to disintegrate each one of these actors. Each of these ways of being. So, let's see how recurrences are gestated and how to work on them, so that we begin to modify our destiny, and begin to have a new and conscious life, focused on the awakening of our consciousness. The first thing will be to start by self-observing, to discover the psychological defects that are manifested in us through desire and thoughts, that begin to communicate telepathically with the defects of other people, and that make us begin to have a strong desire to look for such a person, or to call such a person, or to do such and such a thing. For example, we have our partner, and we have understood how important our partner is, and how important fidelity is, to achieve spiritual birth. But it turns out that we have a recurrence of adultery. Because our adulterous defect comes with that sexual commitment with another person from a past life. Then, for this adultery to take place, a telepathic communication begins to move between our lustful defects and those of that other person. Desires begin to move in us, and in turn, certain desires begin to move in that other person. A desire to flirt or talk to that person. If we are in self-observation, we can get to discover those psychological reactions that start happening in ourselves. But we must also observe how our personality helps. Because our personality always leads us to act in the precise and adequate way, according to the circumstances, so that these defects can manifest themselves. We can have a very social personality that facilitate the manifestation of a certain type of defects, or we can have a shy personality that facilitate the manifestation of other kind of defects. We can have a violent personality, a narcissist one, or a submissive one. And that personality we have developed will make possible the manifestation of the kind of defects that comes to fulfill their recurrence in this existence. Let's say we have a recurrence of a fight. If we are in self-observation, we can discover the magnetism that starts to take place. There is a person that we dislike and with whom we bring this recurrence of fighting. And if we are self-observing ourselves, we can observe the eyes that start making us feel displeasure and antipathy towards that person, and that are going to communicate telepathically with those of the other person so that this recurrence occurs. If we have in our personality the deep-rooted concept that we cannot allow ourselves to be humiliated by anyone, there our personality will be helping, so that this recurrence occurs. These are facts that we are unaware of. Things happen to us, events that are processed in our subconscious and in our unconscious. We have the illusion of doing, but we do nothing consciously, things happen to us, this is fatal, mechanical. But if we observe ourselves, we discover the desire that is manifested in us, and we discover the concepts of personality that want to lead us to make a mistake. If we become reflective, and we begin to observe all those things that would commonly pass below our reasoning, and we deny those egoic desires, and ask our Divine Mother to disintegrate those desires, those obsessions, all the details that we observe in our mind, emotion, and body, and we refuse to do what the defects wants, we will free ourselves from that recurrence, and from continuing to mechanically fall into the recurrences of our ego. The three factors for the revolution of consciousness are the key to free us, to free our consciousness, so we can start acting freely and consciously. Psychological death will allow us to eliminate all those actors, who are our negative ways of being, who by law of recurrence, have to appear on the screen of our lives to lead us to continue making the same mistakes. In this way we begin to free our consciousness. With spiritual birth, making wise use of our sexual energy, we begin to condense the released essence in our spinal cord, so that it cannot be trapped by the ego again. And with the sacrifice for humanity, we can settle the karmic debts that we have, for the bad actions that our defects led us to commit, and that got us into those recurrences. Doing this, working on ourselves, practicing the three factors, is how we free ourselves. When we disintegrate the different defects that keep us tied to the incessant repetition of circumstances and errors, we free ourselves from the law of recurrence. And freeing and awakening all our consciousness, we free ourselves from the law of return, because we will no longer have to repeat this course that is life, as we will have already achieved the goal, which is to reach self-realization, which is reaching total liberation. And this has been the topic of today. Remember that you can leave your questions, and I will gladly be answering them. The next topic that we will study will be about the laws of karma and dharma, in which we will learn everything about these two laws, and how to negotiate our karmas. Until next time.